Okay.
As long as everyone's okay with us recording, we'll hit record there. Good evening, everyone. And I'm going to kick it over to my colleague Ophelia to start us off.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for attending this evening. My name is Ophelia Burnett, and I am the Democracy Organizer with Open Democracy. And thank you for coming to our Organizing 101. And so we are going to be talking about how to build connections with elected officials, explore the topic of power and who has it, discover what moves you and others to take action, learn strategies for organizing, building relationships, and moving others to action. Next slide. So this is our, Olivia, what is this called? Our land acknowledgement. Sorry, yes, this is our land acknowledgement. I'm going to read this out to you guys. Open Democracy acknowledges that we do our work on Endakina, the traditional ancestral homeland of the Abenaki, Pikikuk, and Wabanaki peoples, past and present. We acknowledge and honor with gratitude the land and waterways and the people who have stewarded Endakina throughout the generations and continue to do so today. Next slide, Autumn. So we like to, give little quotes, and this one is by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. All people are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. And that goes with the work that we do, so I think that's perfect. So some of the things that we'll be learning this evening, trainees would come away with a clearer understanding of what power is, why we each need to be building power in coordination with other organizations, and how they can build power, building relationships, provide tools and strategies for how community leaders can move others to take actions with them. Next slide.
And we just want to start with sort of a common definitions, just so folks that don't understand sort of what organizing is and why we're doing it. People are grounded in that kind of common definition. So we are building, doing community organizing for a democracy that works for all of us. And when we talk about community organizing, this is really seeking to build collective people power to transform people's minds, the systems of government, our institutions, and to really address norms for a common problem. So I like to sort of think about like moms that were against drinking and driving. Those moms organized, they organized to change the law, but they also organized people's hearts and minds to change the worldview and the narrative so that when people were in a bar with somebody, they took away their car keys. So they changed the sort of perception of how we address these things. So that's why that is. And when we refer to democracy, just to ground us in what we mean by little d democracy, it really comes from that Greek word meaning the people, and the people have power. So the last part of democracy meaning power. So really, when we will really restore a lot, talk about people and power a lot throughout today's training. And I want to say that there are different models of community organizing, and to sort of really say that there's like a faith-based called Gamilio organizing, which is really around sorry, Adam, we're not quite there yet. I'm still talking on this one. Yeah, thank you. We're which is a faith-based model about building relationship. There's also the Midwest Academy, which is a model that labor organizations use around community organizing that talks about who's the target, who has the power, how can we map out a strategy and tactics that get people to have the power. And there's also Solinsky's approach around making sure that a movement has a demand really asking what are we demanding that we achieve. So we can sort of digest some of those different versions of and theories around organizing, but I think it's important for us to understand the kind of strategies around building relationships with people that you want to organize, knowing them, getting to know them, getting to know what they care about, what are their values, then breaking down the sort of what is the roadmap? What is the strategy that's going to get us to building that power? And Midwest Strategy has some really good tools and skills for that. And we'll hand it back to Ophelia for the next slide.
Thank you. The only thing is I'm not able to tell which ones are mine or not. So I don't know if Autumn or maybe
Yeah, this
Olivia
one's
can let
yours,
me know.
Ophelia.
Okay, so oppression and exploitation happen because others who don't share our values have too much power and we don't have enough. We organize so that we can together build enough of our own power to confront oppressive power structures and make change. If we're not building power, we're not on the right path towards making real change. I like that a lot. Next
And I
slide.
think when we think about community organizing and those systems of impressions, we sort of talked about like we're changing people's minds and hearts, but you also have to change sort of systems. And so it's good for us to sort of be grounded in some of these systems of oppression and exploitation that exist in our society. And the next one is so what is power and how do we build it? Linda, when you think about power, what do you think about?
I think about the ability to make change, to change something.
Thank you. Yeah, that's an important part of what is power, right? June, what do you think about when you think about power?
People having their way if it's not the kind of power that builds consensus.
Yeah, so there are some people who have power and some people that sort of have power and don't have power. And really, when we want to build a citizens movement, we have to think about sort of what are those power structures in our society and how do we build collective power that empowers other people to have the leaderships and models. What is that society that we want to build? So thinking about how are decisions being made within your campaign and causes and really are we organizing in a way where others are learning skills and empowering others to participate? We'll go to the next slide. So I think it's important to also think about power as our ability to act. So in order to act, if we say call your legislator and somebody doesn't know how to find the phone number of their legislator, then they don't have an ability to act, right? So we also have to think about power as the ability to act and how we teach others how to take action. And that when we think about power, we also have to think about this sort of shared value and vision that Linda said, like that we as people have the power to change the systems, but we need to make sure we're grounded in the same vision and that we have sort of real ability to make power. I love when people say, I want world peace now. Great vision. But how are you going to get world peace now? Maybe you need a plan that's going to get you, what can you as one person in New Hampshire do towards that, right? You have to sort of think about what is your ability and your role in that kind of change you want to make. Linda.
I was just chuckling because I had this vision of somebody in the Miss USA pageant saying, I want world peace now.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So we have to have those values and those visions, but we also have to know what our role is to achieve that. And part of a good organizing strategy is really making sure that our vision and how we get there is part of our strategy on building power. And I think it's important that we sort of think about power mapping, which is another tool that we can use of like, who has the power? If we want to change something that the governor wants to do, like the governor has the power to veto this and not, right? So how do we build power to get the governor to say no to something that we care about? And so it's really important for us to sort of map what's called power mapping, to sort of think about sort of who has power and how can they use that power? How can we build power to influence those stakeholders with power? And there's some really great tools called power mapping, and we can share them afterwards too on sort of how to power map. And I always think it's important to power map our stakeholders and our targets in campaigns as a group, because then we're teaching others how to use that tool in what is, understanding the dynamics of those different campaigns. And I think about, in order to build power, you have to build relationships with people, and you have to build relationships. Um, you can build sort of transactional relationships where people know who you are, but really in thinking about organizing, you really want to build transformative relationships. Liz Tantarelli from the League of Women Voters just showed up, and she sometimes calls Senator Gray her best friend, her BFF on working on the online voter portal. And I always chuckle about that, because he's a tough man to build a relationship with.
Yes,
But
he is.
but you're building transformative power. You are being a real person. You are basing your relationship with Senator Gray on respect and mutual interest, and that you have the same goal of getting people to register to vote. And that goal is really creating those sort of transformational relationships instead of those sort of transactional relationships of like, I need you to sign this petition, but having no sort of human contact with them. It's good to ask people to sign a petition because you get their name and your email, where you can then grow in transformative relationships. But I really wanted to sort of introduce the idea of like how to really build deep, meaningful relationships with people that we're organizing with. I'm going to hand it over to Ophelia for the next part.
Is this mine, Olivia?
Yep. So this is where we get interactive.
Sorry. Sorry, I'm having trouble with my internet. So what is the first thing that moved you to action? If you guys can share some of your answers to that in the chat, or you can raise your hand, but what are some things that first moved you to doing this work and, to action?
Go ahead, June.
Okay, June?
Yeah. What moves me to action about democracy is I'm so worried that we're going to lose it by so many things that have happened.
Yeah. And Linda said she was first moved to action during the Vietnam. And I love the move to children. Your children move you to action to create a more equitable world. How beautiful is that? And also what's happening in Gaza. Yeah, that's heart-wrenching. Susan Richmond, what moves you to action?
Well, trying to think back to probably Vietnam also. Just that the times that I felt opposed to something, or really nauseated, horrified by something. So
I thought the question was, what's the first thing?
Yeah, it is. What's the first thing?
The history of kind of why
We took action.
why
Yeah.
we took action.
yeah,
Sorry.
so first thing would be when I was in college and saw that I felt like we were all on a conveyor belt to prop up this machinery that was in Vietnam.
Mm.
And it was kind of, the government had gotten inside us and used us, and I didn't know how to fight against that, but I felt I needed to.
Yeah, Liz Tantarelli.
Yeah, I kind of hate to admit this because it's an anti-feminist statement. But when I was asked to help with something, that moved me to action. Somebody recognized something that I had done and said, we've got this project that needs accomplishment. It was a local municipal thing. And you would be a good person to do it. That's a very flattering thing. So it wasn't something that I would have done on my own, but once they asked me and I said, yeah, I could help, and that moved me to action. I hate to admit that, I really do. It's, we hear about women politicians who got into politics because someone asked them to run.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Whereas men get into politics because they want power or they want to change things. So I'm sorry.
No, but
to
I think
admit it.
Liz, thank you for saying that because I think it's so true. Many people are moved to action because they got invited to take action or
Yeah.
somebody asked them to join them. And I think it's totally true. And I think when we talk about being good organizers, making sure we are making those invitation and those asks of others to join to join our movement.
Yeah.
Um, we'll head to the next one. Ophelia, are you good? Yeah.
Yes, I switched over to my phone. So we've asked others the same question, what moved them to take action and what is their passion? We had from Ellen Leonard. She says that fear, frustration, anger, and most important, she says that there is a famous line, I am only one. I can't do everything, but I can do one thing. I don't have that quite right, but you get my point. We can all do one thing. Yes, I love that. And then we also have from Keith Thompson, love of my country, belief in the greater good. We also have from Melissa Bernardin, wanting to make life better for the majority of people, reduce human suffering. This has changed for me over the years. I used to focus on saving the planet, but with what we've already unleashed, I feel like the focus needs to be reducing human suffering. And then Michelle Sawyer, she says feminism. I want a truly feminist society, and I won't stop until I get it. And I kind of wanted to comment on that as well. What has moved me to action? I would say because of sort of my direct experience with incarceration. Some people don't know that, but I was incarcerated. And after getting out and seeing how a lot of other individuals that has been formerly incarcerated and, people of color, face so many barriers and are stereotyped because of that, and because of their past. I really felt like that's something that I was called to do, and I want to be that voice for others that has experienced what, a lot of other people who has been directly impacted by the system. And so dealing with that and coming from that is what actually pushed me and why that's my passion and what moves me to action. So I just wanted to comment on that a little bit.
Yeah, so it's so interesting that so many people are moved to action by so many different things, whether that's an invitation by a friend to participate, whether that's feeling like they don't believe in that system, or it's a personal experience. Linda, did you want to add here?
No, I was thinking the same thing, is that there's just a lot of different ways that motivate people. And, as I'm thinking about trying to get people involved in this election, I think it's really important to remember that the thing that makes me want to get involved isn't necessarily going to be the thing that makes the people I'm talking to excited. So,
And I think what makes us good organizers is when we're curious and we ask people what motivates them. Because when we understand what motivates them, we can be better organizers. So that's also important for us to sort of think about. Liz Cantarelli, did you want to add anything here? Okay, I'm gonna keep going then. So this is just a lot of people holding signs, but people people like to take different actions, right? Some people like to write postcards. Some people like to be in the street. Some people like to be behind a table and talking to people. Some people like to go door to door. Some people like to go to an education forum. So I think it's important for us to also understand that people want to use their skills in different ways. So I think that when we think about relationships, I think we should approach this about when we build relationships, why this matters, with the same sort of curiosity, right? What sustains people for action? Some people can take action on voting rights and be part of a movement for a decade. And some people can't sustain going to the State House year after year. They kind of get tired of that and they only go for a session or two. And so I think it's also important for when we're building these relationships, we're curious, understanding what's the sort of sustaining people, driving people to take those actions, because I think it's important that we organize and we build skills with citizens, but we also have to understand, like, I understand that Sue Nastasi loves going out to the community and tabling. She enjoys meeting people and talking to people. And so when you're building those relationships, it's important for you to understand what motivates people. And also, if they get tasks they like to do, they're more likely to do them, right? If Liz Tantarelli, has anyone ever asked you to do something you didn't want to do?
Yes, make phone calls.
Right?
Okay.
You don't like to make phone calls,
I
right?
hate making phone calls. I mean,
I
to a
love
friend,
making.
yes, but I hate cold calling somebody and trying to strong arm. I'll send an email, but the phone turns me off.
Right. So understanding those things, Liz Tantarelli doesn't like to phone bank. I love to phone bank. I think Linda likes to go door to door. Maybe I'm wrong on that.
I used to.
June, I think,
Pre-COVID.
likes to engage with people on Facebook, right? Building relationships on social media. So I think understanding that we all have, these relationships matter. Thank you for putting in the chat. You like to call people too. I'm not the only nerd that likes to make phone calls. Thank you for that validation. But I think that it's important for us to recognize those own skills. But I have a fellow activist who said to me, I will never public speak. I don't want to do it. I'm bad at it. I just don't want to do it. And then as they evolved as an activist, they realized that their voice is important and they would speak up and testify at a public hearing or speak out and use their voice. And so they really grew into a spokesperson role. So even though they said they didn't want to be a spokesperson, they understood that their voice mattered and that they built the skills and got the courage to be a public speaker, because not everyone loves that. Liz Tantarelli is an amazing public speaker, and you get that skill. But I think that there's a lot of questions in this slide, but I really think that it's important for us to sort of explore a lot of these questions about how we value our volunteers and our movement, how we think about how we're organizing people, how we're showing up, as an organizer. I had this sort of funny story of my friend Melissa, who had somebody who was a great at data entering and always really participating. And she had this one volunteer who just said, "Oh, the wood got selected, and now that I'm older, it's hard for me to really stack the wood." And she showed up one Saturday morning and helped that volunteer stack her wood, because she's like, I'm physically able to do this. And this woman helps me 10 hours a week doing data entry, which is something I hate doing. So, she gave up one Saturday of her of doing that sort of mutual aid and deepening that relationship. But I tell that story not in a way that you have to help all of the volunteers, but I think just understanding to be human and build those relationships. Go to the next slide. Ophelia, that you're up. up your
I
mic.
just want to say something really quick because even when I was trying to log in, it was going to ODA Ledge meeting, and two people just messaged me and said that they've been in the waiting room, and they sent me a screenshot and it says ODA Ledge meeting.
Okay, that is a weird thing for Zoom. Can you make sure they have the right Zoom link?
Yes, maybe Autumn, you send it to me and I'll send it to them. But yes, so the next slide. So, your voice. Legislators may not always recognize the effects of state legislation on the people unless they hear about these effects from you. For this reason, you have a responsibility and the duty to communicate with your legislators for representation at the state and local level. Next slide, please. Thanks, Autumn.
Could I comment on that?
Yes,
About
please.
contacting your legislators? Because if you think of it from the legislator's point of view, they get 1,000 bills a year. They cannot possibly read all of those, never mind know the pros and cons of it. So once you've established a relationship with your own legislator, or maybe a couple of others for some reason, they will start coming to you and saying, what do you think of this bill? Because they know we're following it. And I heard this years and years ago, that many of the legislators relied on the lobbyists. Well, think of us as, I mean, I'm an unpaid, so I don't think of myself as a lobbyist, but an advocate's the same thing. They rely on us. So we really need to establish those relationships and get to the point where they will call us on issues that they know we're studying.
Ophelia, will you
And
tell your story about passing the bill for feminine products?
yes, and I was actually just about to piggyback off of what Liz said because that is so true that, and I know firsthand a lot of these legislators, unfortunately, they get a lot of emails every day, so they do delete a lot of them without even reading them. So really trying to either call them or lobbying, going to the state house and talking with them personally on a personal level, they do appreciate that and they will call you and ask for you to come to the state house and testify or get some suggestions from you when you're telling your personal story or just hearing your voice. I was actually told that they reach out to me and they asked me to come to the state house and testify a lot. Um, and like I just said in the chat, I fear public speaking, but I've done it a few times, and I'm getting better as I do it. But when it comes to hearing our voices, I was asked to come to the state house on one particular bill, and that was the feminine hygiene bill that passed actually on my birthday of last year, which would mandate state facilities to give women feminine hygiene products without having to pay for them because previously before this bill they would have to pay for feminine hygiene products, which I think was kind of inhumane because feminine hygiene products to buy a pad or a tampon was ridiculous to pay for like $12, and sometimes because some women have financial insecurities and they weren't able to pay for these things, so it would either have to make a choice between that month of buying their feminine hygiene products or making a phone call to their family. So I worked with the legislators, a couple senators, and the commissioner of DOC, and the bill was passed. So I was really happy about that to see that someone that has never dealt with anyone that was either incarcerated or has anyone that's incarcerated that's close to them, but they actually cared about something like that and they reached out to me to work with them on that, and it actually passed. So I was really excited about that and that they reached out to me to help them on that. So your voice does matter, but like Liz was saying, they don't really like to get all those emails. They get so many a day. So really having that personal relationship with them is very important.
Thank you for sharing that story, Ophelia. And it's important because I think a lot of people, when they heard about Ophelia's experience with the current policies, that helped them sort of say, oh, maybe we should do something differently. And so I think it's important for us to sort of have people who are affected by these things be the voice on a lot of the legislative changes. So we're going to move on a little bit about, New Hampshire's a very, very small place. And I think, if we were in a larger city like Chicago, there might be an endless pool of people to bring into our movement. But we're in a small place. And I think that we also have to realize that maybe in Newbury, there's not a ton of people for Liz to organize to get them to pass an independent redistricting town warrant article. And she has to have a relationship with people, and they have to trust her, and they have to believe that she has values and is committed to this. And we call this relational organizing, when you have those relationships in your local community, especially in small communities. And I would say New Hampshire, even though some of you might live in a bigger city, we're still a small state and have those relationships. I remember doing a campaign where someone's like, "Oh, yeah, that state senator. Oh, she's my cousin." I'm like, "Great, you're headed to Thanksgiving dinner with her. Why don't you talk about your experience as a moderator, and she can understand why you care about voting rights." And those sort of small town New Hampshire stories don't happen in bigger areas. And so I think it's just important to root ourselves in, sort of the geography that we are in. And that, we have these relationships that we can leverage. But we have to make sure we're really working from a place of integrity when we do this important work. Anything else to add here? Okay, keep going. And I like to think of organizing and relationship organizing as an invitation, right? We understand, like, I'm going to invite you to attend this event. I'm going to invite you to go to this event, but maybe you can't come because Tuesday is a bad day for you and you can't come to the State House on Tuesdays. But maybe, an invitation to do something different might be something that you would take on. So I always sort of think about, making those invitations, but sort of thinking about 3 different ways that people could participate in those movements. And once you learn their stories, you can kind of figure out those invitations. But once you've made 3 invitations for somebody to participate and they've sort of said no to you all 3 times, then I think you kind of, have to also realize, like, they said no. Like, I'm gonna also acknowledge that they don't, but I also think that when we do organizing, we're building connections, and we're really meeting people where they are. And sometimes somebody said to me, "Oh man, when I'm doing a lot of organizing, I get tired because I'm not used to sort of, you have to have that kind of energy when you organize. You go, oh, do you want to go to this lame hearing?" No one's going to say yes to you, right? But if you sort of tell them, like, this bill's really important, we need your voice, like, that is a different kind of way of inviting people to participate. So you also have to think about sort of your tone and how you invite people to participate, because we can't change the world by ourselves. We need citizens to participate with us. And I think it's important for us to sort of think about those invitations, but also understand that, like, maybe somebody's not ready for an invitation for activism right now, and that you can ask them on another time. Yes, June.
One of the things that's helped me both when I've done canvassing for the Democrats and also in talking to people about open democracy and protecting democracy is to just explain your own situation briefly, like with canvassing, before asking them to vote for the candidates that you have circulars for. You can say, well, this issue is important to me, and this candidate promotes what I want because it helps me in my life in these ways. And then they can identify with you living a similar life to them, and how that same value or benefit would help them also. And it
So
helps connect.
June has used a tool called a funnel, and we're going to talk about the funnel in a little bit, about sort of building that shared value collectively together. She might not have known she was using a tool called the funnel, but there's a really cool tool we're going to get to just in just a minute.
Can I highlight on that really quick? I appreciate you saying that, June. And I had just said something like this to Yaya. She's in the meeting now last night, because with AFSC, we're doing this voter engagement project, and we're trying to bring in, young professionals, younger people, people of color. Just we're trying to target different communities. And with this kind of work, it's kind of tough to bring those different communities in. And obviously with the younger people, you have to, kind of say, hey, we're gonna have things like this. But I think, like Olivia was saying, it's all about the tone and messaging, because when they hear like, oh yeah, come and vote, they are not interested in voting. But I think, like you said, June, when you talk about something like an issue that matters to you, and see what matters to them, and tell them, hey, this event is about, housing, and how there's so many housing insecurities going on, and how a lot of people are going through so many issues because they can't afford housing, and, find out about how they feel about it. That would probably be more prone to get them to come to an event than to say, oh, this event is solely just about voting. So definitely the messaging and the tone really changes the outcome of having someone coming to an event. So I agree with you on that.
Right. But it's also, when I'm a mom and I say clean your room, my daughter's going to be like, no. But when we talk about like, hey, if you get your room cleaned by 2, we can go grab an ice cream. Like there's, a different incentive. So you can use these organizing with your family too. Not to say you. Anyway, we'll keep going here. I think it's also important to understand that organizing is grounded in empathy. So I've been talking a lot in this training, but I think when we're out in the community, we want to listen to people. We want to understand what their pain is, their frustration, their angers, their suffering, and not blame them as individuals, but also understand that these are systems that are causing kind of the suffering, these sort of unjust systems in our world, and really be able to have people unpack and connect those dots, as Ophelia was talking about housing. Excuse me, and really sort of be grounded in empathy. And I think this is also something that you also have to be grounded in empathy, but also take care of yourself too. And I think sometimes when we feel, Liz, has this ever happened to you? You feel sad about something, you feel angry. Like it's hard to sort of put those feelings aside and have that empathy.
When you've been negotiating with legislators for 14 years on fair maps and they still go bad.
Mhm.
Yeah, I drank a lot that week.
Oh,
Right. So we have to understand sometimes we're frustrated and
Oh,
angry.
or worse,
We're
when independent redistricting passes and Sununu is scheduling the signing party and at the last minute backs out and vetoes it. Those are the moments where you just want to pull your hair out.
and there's this great book by Maud Barlow about organizing and community organizing, and talks about how people, when they're invited to organizing, they need that kind of hope. And so you really have to sort of make those invitations with hope. But also sometimes when we're feeling angry and upset, maybe those are the moments where we have to sort of take care of our own feelings before we can, you know, be those leaders that sort of demonstrate that. But I'm also saying, like, those feelings are real. Like, we can be frustrated and angry, and we have to take care of ourselves in the movement as organizers too. Um, Ophelia, you're up.
Organizing is about stories. What are the stories society holds up, and how do our communities, schools, media, and newspapers reinforce those stories? What are our stories and those of our neighbors, and how can we use our stories and our experiences to change the public narratives we are told through advertising and the media? So that kind of goes back to the feminine hygiene bill that I talked about, because a lot of people, when they're incarcerated, society kind of forgets about them. And once I spoke about my experience, and it kind of changed the narrative a little bit. And so that's a good example. And I think social media, and I want to kind of promote our social media training that's coming up on the 22nd. So I would love for everyone to look out for their emails for that training coming up. But I think social media is very big right now. So telling your personal stories to get it out there to help advertise whatever kind of event or organizing that you're trying to do, I think is very useful and something that a lot of people are using right now. So I think those tools and tactics are really, really good for right now for this generation. Olivia, I didn't know if you wanted to
Yeah,
add
I
something
think
to
I want to
that.
just add that, like, we want to tell our personal stories about how it affects us, but it's not about poor Olivia that had this awful thing happen. Is that, you know, I couldn't register to vote because I had to go home and get my birth certificate. Luckily, it was at my mom's house and I could go get it and register to vote. But there's other people who might have had a house fire and don't have access to their birth certificates. And we want public policies that, you know, don't sort of make us prove that we're citizens. We need to make sure that we're including everyone in our systems to register to vote. And so I think sort of thinking about, like, your personal story, but then how it connects to other people around us. So, like, the story of me, the story of us, and the story of the narrative of how we want to change our society. And there is kind of some great research about how we tell stories as organizers can move people to take action too. And so I just want to sort of shout out, because I think the hearing that we did on the 1569 in the Senate, people told stories about being adopted and making all of these documents that were hard for people to get. And I think that it was really compelling in that hearing. We didn't get the outcome we wanted, but I think it's important that we continue to tell those stories, that and counteract those messages, because I think there's also other narratives that are being told out in our society that we need to counteract too. Keep going. Next slide.
Thank you. So you can't build a transformational relationship with an email or a text, Facebook argument. You get the picture. So transformational relationships are more genuine, they're more authentic, and you have more compassion. Trying to build with someone, you're not going to want to just send a text. It's going to seem insensitive when you're just sending a text or, a Facebook message. So if you're really trying to build a relationship with someone, a transformational relationship with someone, you want to have a phone call or you want to meet with them in person and really get personal with that person. Next slide, Autumn.
So here's the funnel I was talking about that June said she used the funnel.
Oh, yeah.
The funnel is a really amazing organizing tool, and I learned it several years ago. And I feel like when you use this formula, And it's kind of 4 sentences. You want to build the common ground, right? As June was saying earlier, the experiences, the values, like you build that common ground. The second sentence is your personal story, what motivates you, your values, to participate in this. The organization's history of success. You know, we've done this before. We've mobilized people to come to the State House. Our voices, they listen to our voices. And here's our plan. We want this to happen and that to happen. And then you make them know that they're part of something larger, and then you make the ask. And I will tell you that when I've used this funnel, you get so many more people to say yes to you when you invite them to participate using this formula. And when we think about sort of using this tool as a way where we're making those asks, I think it's really important for us to sort of think about how we're building campaigns using this formula, and making sure we're sort of always building that common ground, telling the story, saying, you know, these tools and strategies have been used for history, and here's our plan to create the change, and then the invitation to participate. Do people understand the funnel? I wanted to have a little bit of time for us to practice the funnel, but you know, if people have, you know, think about it afterwards and want to write out their funnel, I'm happy to practice it with you individually too, because I think it's an important tool to have in our organizer's toolbox in how we communicate with folks. The next tool in our toolbox to build relationships and to organize people is a tool called one-on-ones, which is really like you're meeting with that person one-on-one, whether that's a Zoom meeting or a phone call or sitting down for a cup of coffee. You want to make sure to use those one-on-ones. And we can keep going to the next slide here. So one-on-ones is really a place where you can take the time to learn about people's values, visions, what motivates them, really making sure that you're, you know, building that in to the beginning of your relationship if you can, or the middle of your relationship, but it's always natural to sort of start when you're first building a relationship with somebody. Go to the next slide.
I just want to point out that the way that the tabling that I look forward to, and I just look forward to meeting more league members, and then like a working, volunteering relationship with them, and the one-on-one, because we can talk to the public while tabling about the common accomplishment, what we know of common accomplishments of the league. And that's how I seem to gravitate to tabling, as opposed to, well, let's have a Zoom meeting.
Yeah. I mean, that face-to-face interaction is important, but then I think, you know, following up with them and saying, hey, can we sit down for a cup of coffee? And then we can talk about, you know, here's what the league is doing to build power. You know, this is what we're doing to organize people. You know, here are the ways that we align with our values. And through a systematic conversation, in an hour, I think you build those relationships through one-on-one meetings. I'll go to the next slide here. And when you have one-on-ones, you're really thinking about the goal of this is really to build this relationship with people. What are our shared interests, our values, our goals? How are we building trust? How are we building accountability to each other? So if I say to somebody in a one-on-one, I'm going to send you this material, like I got to follow up and send them that material so that they understand that when I ask them for something, that they'll have that same mutual respect, right? You also want to give a piece of your story, because if you're asking them to share their story about what matters to them, you've got to be a little vulnerable yourself. You also want to build real clarity about what you're doing. Because I think sometimes if people get asked to do something and they don't know where to start, they get really frustrated. So saying like, this is what I need you to do. Your state rep is David Testerman, that's my state rep, right? This is his phone number. I need you to call him about this important issue. Here's a sample script, like giving people that clarity of what to do, and that the vote is happening next Thursday. So please call before that date, right? Like making sure that you're very clear with what you're asking people to do. And that also you're understanding that you're learning from this person too. They're facing real issues and in your community. So I think it's important for us to sort of really be clear on these goals, like that we need to have those different pieces of a one-on-one meeting. That we, those are the ingredients that we need to bake our cake, our organizing cake.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
So how do you see the relationship between the triangle and the one-on-ones? Do you think that you need to sit down with a person as a one-on-one initially to just get to know them and get to know what their perspective is, and then kind of
Yeah, you want to use your triangle in your one-on-one. The
okay,
last 15 minutes of your meeting with them, you want to make sure you're making asks to them
yeah,
or invitations for them to participate. And oftentimes it's good if you sort of write those invitations down before your meeting, so that you don't get to the end of the meeting and be like, oh, I meant to ask them if they'll table with me at the Dover Apple Harvest Festival. But you're going in there, my clear intention is to ask you to join me on this date. And when, they say, oh, shoot, my brother's getting married that day, I can't. Sue says, great, I'm tabling at the Durham Family Day. Can you join me on this day? Right? So that you have kind of those sort of 3 asks in that formula too, of like, you're making sure that you're sort of setting those intentions. But I think it's important when you schedule your one-on-ones to tell them what you want to invite them to participate in, so that it's not coming out of left field,
yeah.
that you've sort of set those intentions when you've sort of set the invitation for the meeting. And I think a lot of people at the beginning are like, what do you want me to do? And I think you got to slow it down and sort of say, I want to take a few moments to get to know you before we talk about the project I hope to work with you on.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks.
No, thanks for the question. We're gonna keep going because I think we got a couple more slides to get through in 4 more minutes, but maybe. So this takes us back to the beginning, right? Of let's be curious, let's have courage, and also let's not judge people. People have all different experience, so like let's have the empathy in our hearts when we're doing this work. We're gonna keep going. So you always want to schedule your one-on-ones in advance. You want to have some of those deep probing questions. You want to make sure you're really understanding, and you want to take some notes too, so that you remember what motivates people. Because if you're doing a few of these, you'll be like, oh, did Sue tell me that? Or did Linda tell me that? Right? Like, so you want to sort of keep your, friends, you're going to keep the people that matter to you, sort of, we want to remember some of these important things. I'm going to just keep going. So I want you to sort of take a moment. I know some of you are taking notes, but to think about, who do you want to build a relationship with, right? Who would you like to have a deeper one-on-one with, so that you can get to know their work and make invitations for them to participate in? And it would be good if you could sort of think about writing down a couple of names of people who you would want to build relationships with, and why you would want to build relationships with, so you can make these invitations after the training. And keep going. I know June has some ideas of friends she wants to ask. So I say what makes a good one-on-one is making sure you're having that ask, right? You know, you're not going to totally propose to this person, but you're really wanting to build that proposal of like, I'm making a proposal for you to participate in this action. That is an intentional conversation that's inviting people to a well-defined role, really taking into consideration their strengths as a person, what they're really good at, and also how they can be part of something to build a stronger movement and a deeper relationships. And you want them to not just have that relationship with you, but the relationship with the organization that you're working with. We're going to keep going here. Ophelia.
Okay, yes. So some of us could have been advocating and organizing for a few years, few months, and some of us are just starting. So what are some things that you guys learned today, and what will you do to practice democracy today? I don't know if we want to go around the room, but I can go around from how I see everyone on the screen. So I'll start with June.
Oh, well, I was able to remind myself at how important stories are. I do use stories, but I think it's something I have to keep in mind even more so.
Yes, thank you for sharing that, June. Whose story is more powerful than your own? Linda, what did you learn today?
Well, I kind of wanted to take this relationship building information because I'm starting to get more involved politically for this upcoming election, and I just feel like a lot of barriers to asking people to get involved. And I'm trying to, I know I have a lot of that to do, and I'm just a little reluctant about it for some reason this year. So I think what I learned is I just have to slow it down. I just can't call a whole bunch of people and say, I really need help with this and this and this and that. And I just have to like slow down and do more work on relationship building before I go through my whole list of people that I think might be interested in helping.
Thank you, Linda. It's all about those relationships. So take your time. You got this, Linda. We have faith in you. So thank you for sharing that. We have Sue. Sue, what did you learn today, or what will you do to practice democracy today?
Well, the funnel idea drew me in quite a bit too of, building the relationships, the meeting, and having purpose behind the building the relationship. Yeah, so that's what I'm going to try to work on the most.
And from what Olivia says, you love public speaking and meeting with people. So I think you're going to do really good with that. The funnel for myself as well, that was something that I didn't know about before. So even though I've been organizing for going on 2.5 years now, that was definitely something new for me. So I really appreciate that. Thank you, Sue.
Well, public speaking, it's, I kind of have to cite myself up for that, but I've been in past work of speak to the public, and then I can say, okay, almost you're speaking to the public, you put on your best, how you believe, and to build that rapport or whatever you need at that time. And so that's what I look like at.
Thank you for sharing that. I'll take note of that because I don't like to do public speaking. So I'm gonna keep that in my my mental storage. Thank you. So we have Susan. Susan, what will you do to practice democracy today, or what did you learn?
Well, I think, I'm sorry. It made me appreciate the extent to which relationships has been really critical in my being involved. So I guess Linda and Olivia, both of you have mentored that or been leaders and groups I've been in, and I think I'm using it now in the work that I do, of really enjoying and appreciating people. And I know when I've gone out door to door with other people, I notice what really works with a colleague is, this is someone we just lost this year, but she was amazing at knowing how to make a bond with whoever just opened the door. And that's how it all happened from there.
Thank you, Susan. Again, those relationships are so key and so important. So yes, thank you for sharing that. And Casey, what did you learn today, or how would you practice democracy today?
Oops, sorry, just trying to find the unmute. I really like the pyramid idea, or the funnel, sorry. I really like that, and we'll try to implement that moving forward. But this was really informative, and I'm looking forward to the next webinar that you mentioned earlier about, I think, social media.
Social media, yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you for joining, Casey. And
You're
so we have Donna. What did you learn today, or how will you practice democracy today?
Well, I think I learned that how important relationships are, and what you're doing, what I've seen other people doing, and that I really need to spend some time and learn how to do this, and maybe get some people to follow and help me with that, because I realize it's very important, and that's good to know, and know that whatever we do will be helpful. So thank you for motivating me to want to do more of this.
Of
Thank you.
course. Thank you. So as we see, organizing and relationship building goes hand in hand. So we have definitely Autumn. She has this like on the back of her hand, so she knows this. We're going to go to Griseli. What did you learn today, or how will you practice democracy today?
I learned, well, not necessarily. I might have not. It was somewhat more confirmed for me, the part of how when Olivia was saying about just our stories, just sharing our stories, and that actually, that can make a big difference when people into it. I believe in my experience is what I've seen, and it goes both ways from what I've heard someone as well. It just tends to bring the humanity part that we're missing to it. I believe, because everyone has a story, but do we take the time to listen or hear out everyone's story, or however they've been impacted, and whatever the case may be? Is the answer is no, we don't. So I think that's just something that was further confirmed for me. And the funnel, we actually used the funnel yesterday without using the funnel, so it was so I'm glad to see that it's actually in a form with the funnel. That way it's easier to remember as well. But yeah, and thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Griseli. And so last but not least, Yaya, what did you learn today, or how are you going to how are you going to practice democracy today? I know you were really excited about joining us tonight, so.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. So, what I learned, I got in about halfway through, so I'm sorry. But what I've learned, I did write this down, is that you have to be more relatable when building relationships and recruiting people. And I know as a young person, it seems easier to do that because we have phones and we text and everything, but that doesn't work. So I definitely am reminded to not just make calls. I mean, not just text and email, but make calls. That could possibly do a lot more than just sending a text, because you're in people's faces with it. Definitely. And again, just being more relatable, because I remember as we were talking yesterday, what you were saying, Ophelia, and saying stuff like, oh, come to a voter engagement thing, and people's ears turn off. So you have to kind of like dig a little deeper and what the focus is to grab someone's attention. So that's definitely what I learned and what I'm reminded of.
Thank you, Yaya. So that goes back to the transactional and the transformational relationships and the tone and messaging. So Yes, thank you for joining as well. Yeah, yeah. So to end this out, close this out, Olivia, did you want to take that?
Did we have one more? I forget.
No,
I
this is the last
No, this is it. Okay, great. I want to thank you all so much for coming to the organizing training tonight. And will follow up. We did record tonight's session, so we'll follow up with a YouTube link. So if you came in late, you can get the first part of the training, but we'll also send around the slides, and also maybe we'll PDF the funnel so you can print it out, or draw your own funnel for you to sort of think about it. But I also think if you want to practice the funnel or practice having a one-on-one, like give Autumn, Ophelia, and I a call. We'd love to be a resource for you in growing skills on doing this really important work to create a democracy that
Put
works
me on
for
your
all of us.
list. I need to practice.
Well, and also I think maybe practicing with each other, right? So
Yeah.
some of you live in the same town on tonight's training, so. But I'd love to practice with you, Linda.
Yeah, we'll definitely do that sooner than later.
So thank you all so much, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for all you do. Thanks. This is really terrific. I really appreciate it.
Thanks.